In this video, we're going to build the getTrips function, which will send an AJAX call to the getTrips.php file, which will retrieve all the trips from the database and display them on the trips page. So let's create the AJAX call. So I'm just going to copy that one and just customize it. Okay, so we're going to send the call to the getTrips.php file. We're using the post method, okay, and well, we don't have really to specify the method here because we're not going to be sending any data. All right, so we have no data to be sent, and then if the AJAX call is successful, we're going to have a return data, which will place inside the trips div that we placed inside the trips page. So the ID of that div is my trips, and that's the div we are looking at. All right. So we are just going to select the div using its ID and then change the HTML content using the return data. All right, and if there is an error, then we're just gonna go to the same div and just display an error message. Okay, so now let's go to the PHP file and retrieve the trips from the database. So first of all, we're going to start a session and connect to the database. We can just copy the code straight from the previous file. Okay, then to retrieve all the trips, we're going to need to run a query. So the query is going to select all the trips from the database for the connected user. So let's build our query and store it inside a variable SQL. So you're going to select all records from our table, car share trips. The condition here is we need a match for the user ID. Okay, so you can get the user ID again from the session array. Like we did there. Okay, so now let's run the query and store the result in a results variable. So again, this function will take the connection link and the query itself. Okay, now let's check if the query is successful. So we're going to check if results, okay, like that. If the query is not successful, this is going to return false, okay, and we're not going to get here. So if the query is successful, then we're going to check the number of rows inside the results variable and then fetch the data inside it and then show all the trips on the page. But before we go ahead, I'm just going to print this variable just so that we have an idea what we've got inside. Okay, just a comment. The trips table is called car share trips. Okay, so let's save. So now if we go back to our JavaScript file, we need to make sure that we call this function getTrips. Okay, let's have a quick look at the URL we used here. So I named that file getTrips with one T. Okay, I'm just gonna take one T there. Okay, so let's call this function once we load the page to get the trips. All right, so now let's save and refresh the page. Okay, so that's our results object. So you can see there the number of rows is 3, right? And that's what we expect for this user because we've got 3 records. So the first thing we're going to do in the PHP file is check the number of rows inside our results object. So to do that, we're going to use the function mysqli number of rows. Okay, so we're going to check if the number of rows is greater than 0. That means that the user has created some trips, okay, before, and we are ready to show those trips. Otherwise, we're just gonna echo a warning message saying to the user that they have not created any trips yet. Okay. Let's add a couple of classes, alert and alert warning. Okay, so if the number of rows is greater than 0, so you've got records there, so you're gonna fetch data inside the results object. So we're gonna use the MySQLi fetch array function as we did before. So we're gonna have a while loop, which will loop through the different rows of the results objects. So every time we're going to store the results inside a row variable. So we're going to start with the first row, then the second row, and we're going to keep going until the last one inside the results object. Okay, so you've already covered this many times before, so you must be very familiar with this. Okay, so the function is MySQLi fetch array. So it's going to take as a parameter the result object. You can give it another parameter. So I'm going to give it a MySQLi associative because I want the row array to be an associative array, okay, with keys. So I'm going to add MySQLi underscore associative. All right. All right. So now for each row, before we display a trip, we're going to check if the trip is regular or not. Okay, because the way we display regular trips is going to be different from the way we display one-off trips. The regular trips are going to have the days, the weekdays and time. I'm going to say they're regular. The one-off trips are going to have a date and time. I'm going to say they're one-off journey. All right. So let's check the frequency. So to get the frequency, we're going to go inside our row. And the frequency is going to correspond to the elements of key regular. So a quick reminder, the row is going to have all these elements, okay, for each record. All the elements inside that we can see in our table. So now we're looking at the elements of key regular. So let's check first if it's not regular, meaning the value is n, like that one. So if it's not regular, then to make it easy for us to display all these elements, I'm going to store this inside a variable I'm going to call frequency. okay? And let's say the frequency is 1 of journey, right? And we're gonna need to display this line as well. So you're gonna have the date at time. So to get the dates, we're gonna go to the row and get the element of key date. So let's store everything inside a variable I'm gonna call time. So that's gonna be, again, date at time, okay? So to get the dates, we're gonna go to the row array and use the elements of key date. And then let's add to this at like this. And then let's add time. So the time is going to be the element of key time. Okay, and let's have a dot right at the end. Okay. Now, if the trip is regular, then the frequency here is going to say regular. Okay. And the time is going to be slightly more complicated. So what we're going to do, so let's just add a trip there that is regular, just to see. We've got all of these look as one of journeys, so let's add a regular one. Okay, so we need to find a way to get all the weekdays where the trip is made, and then we're gonna create a variable that shows weekdays at time. The easiest way is to create an array and then go through our row, and whenever we find that a weekday has got a value 1, we just add that weekday to the array. So we're going to end up with an array, in our case here showing Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so 3 elements. Then we're going to use a function to combine all these weekdays, okay, using a minus sign. All right, and then we're going to show them like that, and then we will add the time. Okay, so let's create an empty array and call it array. So let's start with Monday. So we're going to go to our row and just check if the value of Monday is 1, then we're going to push the value Monday into our array. So let's do that. So if the elements of key Monday has got a value 1, then we're going to push the value Monday inside our array. So to do that, we can use a function called array push. This is very similar to the JavaScript function or the JavaScript method push of arrays. So this function is going to take a couple of parameters, the array itself and the value that we would like to push into our array. So in our case, we want to have something like this. All right. So you're going to do exactly the same thing for all the other weekdays. You're going to go through Tuesday, Wednesday until Sunday. Okay. So to save time, I'm just going to pause the video. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Okay. And then just replace Monday with all the other weekdays. All right. Now we want to show something like this. Okay. So we've got the elements inside our array. In our case, in that case here, the array is going to show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So to have something like this, we're going to need to concatenate those elements inside the array and just place a minus sign between them. So we're going to use a function called implode. So this function is going to take a couple of parameters, our array, okay, and whatever we want to place inside the between the elements. So in our case, we want to place a minus sign between elements. All right. So this function is going to return this. Okay. Now the final result we want is all of that. So I'm just going to place everything inside the variable time, and we're going to add to that at time. Okay. Here we go. So now we've got the frequency and we've got the days and time, or the weekdays and time. All right. So now everything else should be the same, whether the trip is a regular one or a one-off one. So now we are ready to echo the trip. All right, so we're going to do that in the next video.